Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Mark Martin. Today, ransom demand for the American missionaries abducted in Haiti. We'll tell you what they're asking for and what missionaries are facing in Haiti. Also, divisions over vaccine mandates. Americans protesting across the country over the requirements, with some leaving or losing their jobs, including now a college football coach and some of his staff. Plus, what life is like now in Afghanistan under the Taliban and how the situation is still critical for Americans and others trying to get out.
For the Democrats, this is not a good situation to report from them because it's just a debacle. And for the Republicans, I just think it's really sad and horrific.
An investigative reporter weighs in on the lack of news coverage from Afghanistan and tells us what she's hearing from her sources in the country. Can some diets really be different for women than for men? One husband and wife went on the same diet. He lost weight, she gained 20 pounds. So she wanted to find out why.
We know that most research is done on men. It's assumed to apply to women. And yet women are not, men with breasts. We've got very different hormonal exposures. We've got very different hormonal balance. And so the way that we eat really needs to be different.
We'll hear why diets designed by men for men can spell disaster for women. Those stories and more today on CBN NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
We begin with demands for ransom for the abducted American missionaries in Haiti. The gang that took them is asking for $1 million each for a total of $17 million. The missionaries work with Christian aid ministries in Ohio. They supply Bibles, build homes, and fight poverty around the world. And they've been asking for prayer for those that are holding them hostage. Brody Carter has the story.
We request urgent prayer for the group of Christian Aid Ministries workers who were abducted while on a trip to visit an orphanage on Saturday, October 16.
Christian Aid Ministries is calling on all prayer warriors after 17 of their missionaries were kidnapped at gunpoint. 16 Americans and 1 Canadian, including 5 men, 7 women, and the youngest of 5 children, just 2 years old.
They're basically going for the money, and Americans have got the money, and so they are doing this for money. They probably won't harm these individuals. They may beat them up.
The missionaries were snatched by the notorious 400 Mawazo gang. The apparent targeting of American church groups has sounded alarm bells for other missionaries like Dr. David Vanderpool.
They tried to kidnap my wife at one point. Our base manager was murdered at our front gate, and then we also had 2 other team members who were kidnapped and tortured for 4 days.
Dr. Vanderpool says criminals rule the streets, with gang violence rising amid economic turmoil, deadly hurricanes, and the political disarray following the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse.
Kidnappings have been up 300% month over month, so they're mostly Haitians who are kidnapped. This particular kidnapping is especially worrisome for aid workers since now we're being targeted.
The White House and State Department say they're working with Haitian leaders to locate and bring back those missionaries, saying, quote, the welfare and safety of the U.S. citizens abroad is one of the highest priorities of the Department of State. Meantime, church leaders are putting their faith in God to bring home the abducted.
These gangs are just following the enemy's, playbook, and we need them to follow the Lord's playbook. Prayer is the answer, and so, God is in complete control, even though it appears to be it's utter chaos, for mankind.
Brody Carter, CBN News.
Here at home, the country is sharply divided on COVID-19 mandates, and that division is playing out in cities across the country, with parents protesting and police officers being forced to choose between the shot or staying on the force. And a college football coach is out of his job over the mandate. CBN's Jenna Browder brings us a look at all of these developments.
Protests are erupting across the country over COVID-19 mandates. This as concern grows over a new subvariant of the virus, and the FDA is expected to make a big announcement. Parents in California are fired up, protesting outside the state capitol and across the state.
The harder they push, the louder we'll get.
California teachers are now required to get the shot. The mandate coming for students, too, once the vaccine is fully approved for their age groups.
I'm not a parent that wants my child to be controlled by the government, so I want my child to not be vaccinated.
In Chicago, a face-off between police officers and the mayor. 35% haven't reported their vaccine status and risk losing their jobs. In Washington state, an officer signed off for the last time, forced to leave for not complying.
This is my final sign-off after 22 years of serving the citizens of the state of Washington, being asked to leave because I am dirty. Numerous fatalities, injuries. I've worked sick. I've played sick. We've buried lots of friends over these years. State 1034, this is the last time you'll hear me in a state patrol car. And Jay Inslee can kiss my ass.
Nationwide, 62% of all officer deaths last year were from COVID. In the sports world, Washington State has fired its head football coach and 4 assistants for refusing the state mandate.
I mean, it's just unfortunate. This team, they don't deserve this. I mean, that is a real point of heartbreak.
It all comes as a so-called subvariant called Delta Plus ramps up its spread. About 6% of all cases in the UK are from this new strain, which has already spread to the U.S. Meanwhile, some governors are pushing back against the mandates. Montana Governor Greg Gianforte telling CBN News.
This Delta variant is dangerous. It's spreading quickly. But it's spreading whether there are mandates or not. And unfortunately, these mandates have created an economic pandemic where previously we only had a health pandemic.
But a new study from the COVID States Project shows support for governors slipping in states without mandates. While the battle brews, the FDA could make an announcement on booster shots this week. The agency expected to recommend people get boosters that match their original doses, but could still allow mixing and matching.
I think mixing and matching would reduce supply chain complexity quite a bit, and so the end result would be more boosters and more arms, and that matters a lot.
And we should mention at midnight, a vaccine mandate went into effect in Seattle. The city reports 99% of its employees have complied. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Flags are being flown at half-mast to honor COLIN Powell, who died from complications of COVID-19 at age 84. Powell was fully vaccinated but had been battling multiple myeloma cancer, which weakens the immune system. Powell was the son of Jamaican parents. He had 2 decorated combat tours in Vietnam, was a national security advisor to President Ronald Reagan, and served under 4 presidents, including George W. Bush as Secretary of State.
General Powell is an American hero, an American example, and a great American story.
But along with his service controversy following his 2003 speech at the UN defending the U.S. invasion of Iraq. Even so, Powell was highly regarded by political leaders around the world and received the Presidential Medal of Freedom twice. Turning overseas now to the Philippines, where President Rodrigo Duterte has announced he's retiring from politics when his term expires next year. One potential replacement, world boxing legend Manny Pacquiao. He's stepping out of the boxing ring to enter a new arena, presidential politics. CBN's Lucille Toulousan has more in this exclusive interview.
I just heard the final bell, were the words of the great boxing icon Manny Pacquiao as he announced his retirement from his phenomenal boxing career. Spanning 4 decades, he became the only boxer to win 12 world titles in 8 divisions. He thanked boxing for getting him and his family out of poverty and for inspiring many people. Pacquiao, currently a senator in the Philippines, has announced his candidacy for next year's presidential elections.
What compelled you to run for the Philippine presidency?
I already announced my retirement and I want to focus to a bigger fight in life, which is serving people, fighting against corruption and injustice.
Part of that corruption deals with $200 million in unaccounted aid for the pandemic. Pacquiao has questioned 4 government agencies for alleged misuse.
I saw the situation of this country is really bad. People are suffering and what I saw is hopeless. Our people deserve a better future. I always believe that God has a purpose for me, and He raised me from nothing into something for a purpose. Not only giving inspiration to the people, but also to help them and fight for them.
What is your answer to, people who tell you that it is going to be a very difficult fight because you're up against corrupt people who are also in power?
One of my favorite verses is in Isaiah 41 verse 10. It says, so do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. So, only to God we fear. We have fear. The most important thing, we glorify God in our daily lives.
Lucille Talusan, CBN News, Manila.
Coming up, we'll hear from one reporter about what her sources are telling her about the Taliban and what life is like now in Afghanistan. We'll have that story when we come back. Welcome back to Newswatch. Even though much of what's happening in Afghanistan isn't making headlines now, the situation is still critical there for Americans and others attempting to leave the country. I spoke with Tori Richards with the Washington Examiner about what her sources are telling her from inside Afghanistan. You've been covering the situation in Afghanistan extensively, and even though it's not dominating the headlines as it was a few weeks ago, what can you tell us? We're hearing dire reports of Taliban rule.
Oh my gosh, it's horrible. I mean, they're back to beheading people, hunting people down, going from home to home, and just terrorizing the citizens. I mean, it's not the kind of gentler Taliban that they had promised.
Are there still Americans in the country and allies who are still trying to get out, Tori?
Yes, there are probably thousands of Americans. No one knows exactly how many. Plenty of allies. I've been talking to a family that is desperately trying to get out because someone in that family worked for special operations under our command. And even a general who is a source of mine wrote to the State Department saying, help these people, but that doesn't really matter. They haven't gotten on a plane. So they just hear gunfire every night. They see people hung up in the square. They're just terrified, hunkered down in some home that's not even theirs because they don't want any trace coming back to them. And so then they text me almost every day saying, when is it our turn? It's just tragic.
Wow. Well, there's much concern specifically for women and children. Can they expect any freedoms under the Taliban?
No, in fact, the person that's communicating with me is an engineer, and it is the sister of the special operations soldier. And she is afraid to even go outside. She's heard of people who are females who have their phones seized when they're just on the street, and the Taliban will go through the telephone and see who's on there. One woman was arrested for having a male's phone number in there. Another woman was beaten for having music on her phone. And so this woman is a high-ranking official. She had an engineer job with electrical and roads, that type of thing. She has a college degree, but she can't go to work because they don't use women in jobs anymore. She couldn't even get a job doing driver education for buses. So she's just at home. I don't know how they're making ends meet. It's just very sad.
Do you think the Taliban will eventually become less extreme? I mean, in one of your reports, a Taliban spokesman said they don't want any internal or external enemies, yet they're a terrorist group. Can you elaborate on this?
No, they're going to be more extreme as they're emboldened. Right after this happened with the takeover, I was sent a video by a source of someone who was beheaded. And they actually had the head on the person's body, sitting on the chest. And then they held it up by the hair, and they were chanting, praise be to God and the Taliban leader, and shooting their guns in the air. This was several weeks ago. I've had more videos and emails sent to me regarding other people that were beheaded or just slaughtered by the Taliban. So I really think it's going to be worse, unfortunately. And now that the media has kind of pulled out and they're not getting all the attention that they had before, where they, quote unquote, are kinder and gentler, I just think it's open season now.
Why do you think that the media, in large part, is not covering this like they used to?
I just think, first of all, I mean, half the country is Democrat, half is Republican. And for the Democrats, this is not a good situation to report from them because it's just a debacle. And for the Republicans, I just think it's really sad and horrific. There's other things going on now, like this pork crisis and our economy. So I just don't think the news cycle is just going to keep going with it, unfortunately. I really don't. I mean, it's kind of off the front pages, so to speak, now. So it's up to investigative reporters like myself to keep coming back with new stories that are compelling, and hopefully people will pay attention. But the lack of media coverage is just bad for the citizens there. The Taliban has taken over their airways as well, so they don't really have a free press. They don't have journalists doing anything compelling. It's just talking points like China has.
Okay. Tori Richards with the Washington Examiner. Thank you for your insights, Tori. We appreciate it.
Thank you. No problem. Have a great day.
Still ahead, it's one of the most popular diets out there, but it may not actually be good for women at all. We'll explain why right after this. When Dr. SARA Gottfried and her husband followed the same keto diet, he lost 20 pounds, but she gained weight, and that led her to figure out why and what worked for women. Medical reporter Lori Johnson tells us what she discovered.
Men and women carry different hormones. That could be a reason why women might have a harder time shedding extra pounds than their male counterparts, plus why it's important to have a tailor-made plan. Dr. SARA Gottfried learned that firsthand.
I was trying the ketogenic diet with my husband. He lost 20 pounds. I gained weight. And I hear that from so many of my patients and followers. So I think it's really important to realize that the missing piece is hormones.
Diets designed by men for men can spell disaster for women.
We know that most research is done on men. It's assumed to apply to women. And yet women are not, men with breasts. We've got very different hormonal exposures. We've got very different hormonal balance. And so the way that we eat really needs to be different.
Dr. Gottfried's research on women and weight loss led her to develop a hormone balancing diet that she tried on herself and dropped 20.
And this is what was missing for me when I was trying to lose that 20 pounds. No amount of exercise or dieting is going to work if your hormones are out of balance.
She shares her plan in the book Women, Food, and Hormones, along with 50 recipes.
This is a vegetable fettuccine Alfredo. So I'm a big fan of swaps, making sure that you've got a lot of the foods that you love the most. This is taco salad, which I'm planning to have today for lunch. I've also got this beautiful turmeric braised cinnamon chicken. That's one of my favorites. For the kids and also for adults, especially husbands, I've got this nut crusted chicken. This is almost like fried chicken.
Her Gottfried protocol starts with a detox.
So detoxification includes eating cruciferous vegetables, the cabbage, the broccoli sprouts, the radishes, the cauliflower.
The next phase involves eating mostly healthy fats.
For breakfast, I've got an egg avocado bake. So that's an example of really healthy fat.
While the plan is similar to the keto diet, the Gottfried protocol includes more carbohydrates because not eating enough can cause hormonal disturbances in women.
It can trigger a stress response, which raises cortisol that can block belly fat from being lost. Number 2, it can cause problems with serotonin, make it harder to sleep. And number 3, it can raise your reverse T3, which can block thyroid function.
Eating carbs can raise the hormone insulin, so to keep it and others like leptin and ghrelin balanced, the diet calls for a 14-hour overnight fast.
You're doing most of it while you're sleeping. I advise that you don't eat for 3 hours before you go to bed. So for instance, you might finish eating at 8 p.m., and then eat again the next day at 10 a.m.
There's very little sugar on this plan, and once the hormones are balanced, those cravings tend to disappear.
The reason why you're so hungry, the reason why your appetite is so high, is probably your hormones.
Fortunately, there are modified comfort foods.
So one of my favorites, for instance, is this dark chocolate pudding. I also have a dark chocolate coffee cake that I think is delicious. I absolutely love this. And so there are certain breads, as long as they're baked in a certain way, I've got a few bread recipes in the book that really allow you to get some of that pleasure without ruining your metabolic health.
So ladies, if you're wondering why your husband can lose weight but you can't, you might need a women's diet designed to balance hormones so you can shed those unwanted pounds. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
You can catch more health news on Healthy Living with Lori Johnson. It's tonight at 8:30 Eastern on the CBN News Channel or on the CBN News app. Coming up, actress Candace Cameron Bure is speaking up for freedom on one of the most divisive topics in our country today. We'll hear what she has to say when we come back. Stay with us. Television star Candace Cameron Bure, known for her role in the 90s sitcom Full House and now for her Hallmark movies, is raising her voice, not against vaccination, but against mandates. Bure shared a post by @thegirls_named_Blake that summed up what she believes. It read, "I'm not anti-vaccination, I'm just pro-medical freedom." The other graphics on the 45-year-old celebrity's post stated she is pro-informed consent, pro-immune system, pro-early intervention, and pro-sunlight, exercise, real food, and vitamins. She says, bottom line, it's not what she's against, but what she's for, standing up for freedom. She also posted, "This should not separate us. We can have different opinions and still respect and love one another." Well, that's going to do it for this edition of CBN Newswatch. Remember, you can find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel anytime or online with cbnnews.com. Also, tell us what you think about the stories you've seen by emailing newswatch@cbn.com. Or you can talk to us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hope you'll join us next time. Have a great day.